This is Grandmaster Boris Alterman and you're watching Gambit Guide. Second part of Fantasy Gambit today. So in the previous lesson, after e4, c6, we were studying this quite interesting gambit opportunity for white. After the main d4, d5 move, white is just, instead of playing normal e4, e5, or e takes d5, c takes d5, c4, pawn-off attack, or knight c3 classical line. So white is playing instead f2, f3, trying to support white's center, and in case black is playing very aggressively and trying to just counter-attack white's position in the center after d takes e4, f takes e4 and e5. So white is just going for the gambit continuation after knight f3. Force black to capture on d4, and then bishop comes to c4, after which, instead of going into the normal position of Caro defense, we are reaching very similar to the king's gambit position, where black is having a lot of problem about his f7 pawn. White is intending, after short casting, just to start a direct attack over this weakest spot in black position by playing knight e5 or knight g5. All white pieces are very fast coming into the attack. And in the first part of the fantasy gambit, which calls this line, you can just discover a lot of opportunity for white in this position. So how to develop your attack, how to keep the pressure, how to develop your initiative on the black's king side. So when looking on position after f2, f3, we can realize that white is not just having the advantages but also disadvantages. Let's say the knight from g1 cannot be developed anymore to the center to f3. So knight is going to look for other better place. Also, we know usually that it's not a good strategy to develop your knight on the side of the board. So this knight h3 move also cannot be recommended, but white somehow should continue developing his pieces, and the most natural continuation for black is not capture on e4, but just to protect its center by playing e7, e6. For the same idea, let's say, we cannot recommend for black to play knight f6, since it allows white just to win a tempo by moving the pawn after e4, e5, and black's knight has to go or to d7 or to g8, and definitely white is getting slightly better position, or can transpose his position into the standard lines with f4 and then knight f3, keeping also the space advantage and also quite good development of all its pieces. So that's why e6 is the best and the mainstream in this position. So now, if white is just continue playing like bishop d3, so suddenly white is going to lose all his advantage, because after d takes e4, so f takes e4 will just lead to the losing of white's pawn on d4 after queen takes d4, and still white is keeping slight advantage in development after knight f3. However, in case of queen d8 and then just black continue developing pieces, it's a very big question if white has enough compensation for the sacrificed pawn. So definitely also hard to white to recommend move like knight e2, since black just simply could develop his pieces with knight to d7, then black's bishop could go to e7 or to g7 after g6. So this knight from g8 also can go to e7, so black's position is very safe when it's absolutely unclear how to complete the queen side development, and just white has to castle the king and just takes white time bringing all his pieces out. Maybe white has to play at some point knight g3 and then to bring out this bishop from f1, but definitely it's not exactly what we are looking for. That's why After e6, the most natural for white is just first of all to develop the pieces on the queen side and maybe to prepare the long castling. So that is the idea when white is playing usually here bishop to e3. However, this is a pawn sacrifice, and now we follow the game between Saveli Tartakower and Gerd Wienrich from Liege 1930 tournament, where this gambit line for the first time was played. So after bishop e3, black could take the pawn and place d takes e4. And now you can realize that f takes e4 will be met by queen h4 check, g3 or bishop f2, and queen takes e4, just winning a pawn, for which white hardly even could find some serious compensation, since at the same time we have two pieces hanging, a rook on h1 and a bishop on e3, which almost forced white just to play queen f3, trading the queens or even giving away one more pawn on c2. So definitely we cannot recommend this way. So white's main idea after d takes e4 still to sacrifice a pawn, and Tartakower played in this position knight d2 move, which becomes just very popular in such a position. E takes f3, so now black has to accept the pawn sacrifice, and knight takes to f3. So white has three pieces in the game already. So the bishop from f1 is going to be developed to d3. In such a situation when black is having pawn on e6, is no point to bring the bishop to the c4, since quite difficult to find the targets over the a2 ga diagonal. So bishop on d3, keeping an eye on black's king side, and just helps white to develop attack on the king side. So in that case, white could decide where to castle the king. So let's say in case of bishop d3, we can even consider the plan with queen e2 and the long castling, and to use all energy of white pieces and pawns for the king side aggression. Knight f6, bishop d3. So later on, Vasily Smyslov just introduced even more interesting continuation with knight to c4, but these games of Smyslov we will just study later on. Bishop d3 played Tartakower, and after b6, queen e2, bishop d6, short castling, and knight bd7. So black is trying to take more control over the e5 square. However, white pieces are very active, and after knight c4 is already starting point of white's attack. Black's bishop has to move to c7, and white is just bringing the knight to e5. So this e5 is one of the most important outposts for white pieces. So thanks to the space advantage and the better development of all pieces, black is just getting in trouble very soon. So right now we are threatening to capture on c6 and to win the queen. So bishop b7 is almost necessary. And now definitely white could just simply continue move like bishop g5 or rook a to e1. However, we have even better and very aggressive move. So let's try to find it. White to move. White comes here with the piece sacrifice, which takes black's king out of the e8 square, and knight takes f7, just sending the king into the journey. After king takes f7, knight g5 with a check. So another target is a pawn on e6. Black is already in very unpleasant situation, since after king g8 we can just simply play knight takes e6, attacking the queen, threatening the bishop, intending also bishop to c4, It's very hard for black just to find the solution for all these problems. Definitely black is playing here king e7. However, white is continue attack the most natural move. Knight takes e6 check. King takes e6. So I said the check, of course, was to the black's king after knight takes e6. And now bishop to c4 check. Finally, king e7 is necessary, since move like knight d5, just black is getting completely losing position by queen g4, and there is no way to escape from the mating threats. Let's say after king d6, bishop f4 check, black has to capture, queen takes f4, king to e7. Definitely white could just play rook e1, check, just to show that black's king just cannot escape, but queen f7 wins at spot after king d6 and queen e6. Game is over. So black's king cannot survive in the center of the board when all white pieces are so actively posed toward the center. So by sacrificing the two pieces, white is getting just extremely strong attack, and move bishop c4 check force black's king to go to e7. However, after bishop f4 check, where to go with the king? Let's say if king goes to f8, so white could even bring the queen into the attack after queen e6. However, even more dangerous for black. After bishop takes e7, queen takes e7, here move queen e6, straight in the mate. If black knight is coming to b8, so white has just many alternatives here, but the most simple one is just next sacrifice. Rook takes f6, g takes f6, queen takes f6, and black's king is going to be mated after king e8, and then rook e1 is the most simple and decisive continuation. So after bishop f4 check, black already has to give at least a piece, so it plays knight e5. However, d takes e5. It was also quite strong just to capture with the bishop, after which white is keeping incredibly strong attack. Let's say bishop takes e5, queen takes e5 check, king f8, and then rook a to e1, and how black could escape from additional white threats. Let's say move like queen d7 just cannot save black because of rook takes f6, and with a similar combination which we just saw, g takes, queen takes f6, and the mate is coming. However, even after g takes e5, white just kept incredibly strong attack. Queen d4 check, king h1, knight d5, check on g5, king e8, queen h5 check, g6, queen f3, and black is under mating threat. Queen f7 has to give another piece after knight f4, so white is just gaining decisive material and positional advantage, and black resigned very soon. So this was just first example played in 1930, when after e6 Tartakower found this interesting idea with the pawn sacrifice, bishop e3. So his invention was just supported by the later analysis that white is having just very good compensation for the small material disadvantage, and not by surprise Vasily Smyslov takes this Tartakower's idea into his open repertoire, and f3 line 1943 in his game against Kann, and in 1949 in his game against Gerben Erno from the Budapest-Moscow match. So let's look at these games. D takes e4, knight d2, e takes f3, knight takes f3, knight f6, knight c4. This move is slight improvement from the bishop d3, which was played by Tartakower. So white immediately takes more control over the e5 square as well. Black cannot play bishop d6 anymore. Knight d5, bishop d2. So here we can see additional advantages of knight c4 move, that bishop after knight d5 can go to d2 and not to f2. So bishop, we keep the bishop on the active diagonal. Next, of course, bishop d3 moves and queen e2 and then long castling. So white is having a lot of opportunity on the king side. We are open, we are semi-open files E and F. Bishop e7, bishop d3. So Smyslov is just developing his pieces on the most natural way. So he's, of course, taking the opportunities that black's queen side pieces just now very passive, and for black it's quite difficult to break the center since e5 is under strong control, and moving the pawn after c5 only opens additional file for white rooks. In any case, white is just going to castle on the long side. So black tried to play in this position bishop h4 and after g3 bishop f6. However, queen e2, a5. So black is intending to exchange one of the bishop in order. White is playing long castling just to play knight b4. However, a3. White is having so good development that no need to waste time for long castling. We can start attack immediately, just not allowing black to play knight b4. Castling short side. h4. Already black is in big trouble, since move like knight bd7 could be made by crucial combination. So can you find it? White to move and win here. Let's go in the next way. Bishop takes h7. So first of all, we ruins black's pawn structure on the king side. King takes h7 only move. Knight to g5 check. Force black to move the king. Since bishop take g5 will just open the h file, which is deadly for black's king after king g8 and queen h5. There is no way to escape from the checkmate. After f5 or f6 we have two opportunities. We can also play knight d6, taking the last window from the black's king, last space. However, move like g6 is also forced checkmate by queen h8. If after knight g5 check black is playing king g8, so it doesn't help much. After queen h5, anyway I would force you to capture on g5, since rook e8, after rook e8 black cannot survive for a while. Queen takes f7, check, king to h8. Now I have plenty of opportunities how to finish my attack, but I believe the most simple move here in such position is just to play knight d6, and black hardly even could survive it. For instance, rook e8 to e7, check on h5, king g8, check on h7, king f8, and queen h8, and this is already a checkmate. So black just cannot allow white to capture on h7 at any moment. So let's back to the game. So if bishop takes h7 just cannot be allowed, black has to bring his knight in the defense, but bishop on f6 is just standing so badly, so black has to move his bishop to e7 instead of knight d7. His idea just to support his h7 protection by knight f6. So right now the combination doesn't work. I would like to draw your attention that after bishop takes h7, king takes h7, knight g5, black is just simply plays king g8, and queen h5 could be met by knight f6, and white's attack is just gone. h7 square is under covering of the knight on f6. However, bishop e7 just losing another tempo which white easy could use by playing knight g5, knight f6, Knight e5. So brings the other piece in the game. So definitely black could capture another pawn on d4. However, by playing bishop c3, white's advantage becomes just decisive. For instance, queen takes d4, bishop to c3, queen d5, rook f1, and white is threatening just to finish the game by combination. Rook takes f7, then bishop takes h7, and then brings the queen to h5. At the same time, we are intending just to go for rook d1, and the black's queen on d5 is a very big danger. So white is having decisive domination of all his pieces. Black played b5. Same. White shouldn't spend time for castling because rook f1 creates a threat. Rook takes f6 is almost decisive. h6. And now white is coming with the next combination. So white to move and win. So same as the previous example. Rook takes f6. Get rid of the only defender of black's position on the king side. Now if bishop takes f6, white could just win the queen by the simple bishop h7 and then knight takes f7. The queen on d8 is gone. So it means that black has to capture the rook with the pawn after g takes f6. However, queen h5, so white has just 5 pieces on the king side, just which makes black task to survive in such a position almost impossible. F takes g5, queen takes h6, f5, check, king h8, h takes g5. So next, I would like just to free the back rank and just to bring the rook into the attack. Black hardly even could stop it. Bishop takes a3. Last chance maybe to bring the rook to the 7th rank via a7 and to cover the h5, but king e2. Queen d5, and white simply plays now knight to f3, and there is no any way, any chance for black to stop rook to h1 with a decisive mating threat. So it was a game between Vasily Smyslov and Erno Gerben from the Budapest against Moscow match in 1949. So another greatest example of playing this gambit line is a game between Vasily Smyslov and Ilya Kann, played in Sverdlovsk semi-final of Soviet Union Championship in 1943. Same variation after bishop e3. I would like to tell you that after bishop e3, when black decided not to capture the pawn on e4, he started to use other lines. However, queen b6 has to be analyzed because black is just threatening to capture white's pawn on b2. And once again, white, instead of protecting this pawn with queen c1 or b3, simply plays knight d2, and this idea was discovered by Yuri Chikovan in his game against Isaac Brager on the team championship of Soviet Union 1967. After queen takes b2 and bishop d3, knight f6 and knight e2, white just got very promising position. So he's going to complete his development with a short cast, and then we can attack the center after c4. Also, white is having just great opportunity of the king side after e4, e5, and then f4 and f5, just breaking black's pawn structure. e6 and f7, very good targets, and just also opens the files and diagonals for all the pieces. So after knight e2 and knight a6, c3, queen a3 and knight b3, suddenly the queen is not feeling here so well. Let's say move like c5 will be met by check on b5, and after bishop d7, bishop c1. suddenly the queen is even trapped. So all this happened in the game between Yuri Chikuvani and Isaac Brager. But let's back to the Smyslov against Kann game. So bishop e3, d takes e4, knight d2, takes on f3, knight takes f3, so knight f6 first, of course, knight c4, so the move which, as I said, was discovered and first played by Vasily Smyslov, and knight bd7, bishop d3. So in the previous game, when black played knight d5, but just very difficult to equalize with such a move. So this time black is trying just a move like bishop e7 happened in the game Turov against Galkin, and here after queen d2 and then long castling, white is just getting also very promising position. Since the same idea, knight e5 and then knight g5, still very unpleasant for black. Knight d5, bishop g5 even possible now. So black cannot play bishop e7 since even knight d6 is quite unpleasant with a check. So look at the situation that bishop on e7 after knight d6 check is just pinned by the white's bishop. Black just cannot capture it. And if black is answering king f8, then after short castling, white is gaining just extremely strong position. So f7 pawn is a good target. And bishop take g5, knight take g5. White is having very good position. So after bishop g5, queen c7, castling short side, h6, bishop d2, bishop e7, and knight c to e5, it's still quite difficult for black to play. Despite the fact white is having a pawn down, all his pieces extremely active, so white is just intending to move c4 away this knight on d5 from the center. Another idea, just to transpose the queen and to expose all the black's position with the sacrifices on f7 or g6 or e6. If black is captured on e5, so just other white's knight is coming to e5, and still a lot of problems for black about his f7 square. So in the game happened knight f6, queen e1, as I explained before. So white is intending just to transpose the queen to the king side. Knight takes e5, knight takes e5, bishop d7, but now queen g3, g5, queen h3. At the same time, white prevents black from castling the long side, because in that case knight takes f7, and short castling is also impossible because queen takes h6. And white is also intending to capture the pawn on g5 after bishop takes g5, since pawn h6 is pinned. Look at rook on h8, which is hanging. Rook f8. That was possible already to capture here on h6 with quite good position for white. However, knight takes f7. It's a bit complicated combination, but after king takes f7 and queen takes h6, black is in absolutely losing situation. The king just cannot escape from the center. Let's say a move like king e8 will be met by bishop take g5, and if black is trying to move away his knight with knight d5, you just simply play queen takes f8 combination, bishop takes f8, and nice checkmate with the two bishops. So by playing knight takes f7 and queen takes h6, white is just put black into absolutely hopeless situation. So black had to accept the sacrifice with the rook. In that case, bishop to g6, once again not allowing black to castle. Queen d6, king h1, not allowing any business with queen takes d4, because bishop c3 would win the piece on f6, since all black pieces are pinned. So there is no way to survive this threat queen takes h6. Let's say bishop f8 once again is losing because of rook takes f6. Black played long castling. However, bishop takes f7, e5, queen takes h6. There is no way for black to organize any counterplay on the king side. Knight e4, queen takes d6. So white is just having exchange up with no any compensation. So Vasily Smyslov quite easily realized his already huge material advantage. So with this quite interesting game, I would like just to finish 2 lessons about the fantasy gambit in the Caro-Kann defense and about quite interesting and tricky line with f2, f3. I would be happy if you can start playing this opening line and could try interesting ideas which were discovered by Savely Tartakower and was developed, of course, by Vasily Smyslov. If you have any question about this opening line or other gambits already you studied, you can leave me a message on ICC. A lot of interesting and different gambit lines from Chess FM Gambit Guide. See you next time.